Total quality management, dead or alive. I'm Dr. Ogden from the Department of Informatics, University of Oslo, and this talk is going to be one about total quality management. Well, the aim and objective of the lecture is to talk about total quality management in general within the context of sport management. But I will also talk about total quality management from a very wide perspective, which includes business process engineering, quality management systems, excellence models, management fashions, and particularly this final part, management action. Management fashions is supposed to lead into this title question: total quality management, dead or alive? So let's start with total quality management. What is it? Well, here we have a definition. It says a core definition of total quality management, TQM, describes a management approach to long-term success through customer satisfaction. In a TQM effort, all members of an organization participate in improving processes, products, services, and the culture in which they work. This is the definition provided by the American Society of Quality. So, according to this American Society of Quality, total quality management is something indeed very much alive. And when we look at, and there are many books what it says here, a core definition of total quality management describes a management approach to long-term success through customer satisfaction. So there is not very much quality in that particular part. It says it's a management approach to long-term success through customer satisfaction. I think it's easier to understand if So the management, the total part. So at least this total quality management, this final part, management, is addressed here. It's this management approach to long-term success through customer satisfaction. And another, so it's a management approach. That means it's not the same as total quality control or something done by the something isolated to the quality control department or the internal control department. It's a management approach, and it has to do with customer satisfaction, customer focus. So, which means that when we look at quality, if you think of quality as according to ISO 9000, quality is defined as the absence of errors. Or it can be described either as the absence of errors, or perhaps more correctly as the way you try to match requirements. Don't remember the exact words, but the general idea is that you have certain expectations and doing something, and if what you're doing matches with the expectations, then that's a reasonable quality. The product you're working on is that if it's a good quality product if it matches with the expectations of the product. In this, so that's how I think quality is much easier understood from a quality control perspective, because then you're not so because it's this quality control or quality management. If you just look at quality management in general, it has to do with identifying defects or potential defects, and then correcting them or correcting the defects or preventing them from happening again. So it says in the second sentence, in a TQM effort, all members of an organization participate in improving processes, products, services, and culture in which they work. So it's a focus on process design, improving processes, and we improve processes in order to improve products, services. And there is also this important aspect of culture. It has to be we're interested in. Well, sometimes some people talk about good enough, but I don't know if that's a very good description of what total quality management is. If you look at the picture here, for instance, from the Toyota factory, this particular picture is from the American plant. But the general idea here is not good enough. It's supposed to be perfect. So perfect in the sense that there are no defects. And there is a process, and the process is quite easily visualized, I think, in this in a fact when you have this assembly line, because you have something that starts at the beginning of the assembly line, and then it goes down and at the end of the assembly line you have the cars coming out and presented to the customer, and the customer expects that there are no defects. It should be as specified. So that is why this statistical process control is often mentioned as part of total quality management, and indeed it was the, as we'll return to soon, it's perhaps, at least the statistical process control, it says something about control, like auditing, but also statistical process control has something to do with the understanding when something is a warning and when something is a defect. So, but okay, let's go from. So we looked at this Toyota car factory, and now the question is then, how do you go from industrial management to sport management? So some people would say that, well, creating cars and working in factories, that's very different from working with athletes. If it be the private sector, the public sector, or the voluntary sector, you have to deal with people, you have to motivate people, and it's not the same as building a machine or making machines or working in a factory and things like that. Nevertheless, I think it's important to remember that when scientific management was created, which is really the starting point for all this, in the 1880s, the leading figure in that movement, Frederick Taylor, as it says here, in 1881, Taylor won the doubles championships of the United States Lawn Tennis Association, and a year later doubles in the Young American CC Lawn Tennis Tournament. Later in his career, he developed a passion for golf, and in keeping with his love of experiment, he attempted to make a putting green that was reliant on water below the surface rather than on natural rainfall. So, what I propose, what I think it's important to remember here is that if you look at scientific management, and which was the basis for the Toyota factory and all that sort of thing, it started with people who were very interested in improving. Taylor was not only interested in improving organizations, he was also interested in improving himself, and particularly in areas like sport. So one could perhaps even say that sport management was an influenced organizational total quality management or scientific management as applied within sport was inspirational for how it could be applied within organizations. So improving sport athletes, teams, sport organizations. Athletes and teams could be used as inspiration on how to improve organizations. So in a way we could say that, perhaps you can say that the arrow here could be turned the other way around. Starting in the 1880s with sport management, total quality management, or quality management, scientific management within sport management, which then created total quality management within industry in general. And I think it's also important what this says about how Taylor's approach in working, when he worked on things like tennis, improving in tennis and golf, and because he was interested in the two things, he was interested in how to design the most useful tools, like different kinds of rackets for playing tennis. He tested different kinds of rackets, different kinds of tools. That's one thing. The other thing was the how to move. So he was interested in improving both the tools and the process of playing, which is exactly the same kind of thing that we focus on. I mentioned on the previous slide on how how total quality management is concerned with improving processes in order to improve products, services, and culture in general. So here is a history of total quality management, also provided by the American Society of Quality, as they see it today, 2023, and it starts with scientific management. It starts in the 1920s, but as we know, scientific management started in the 1880s. Although the name, although they call it different things, like shop management, it was the book that really defined the term was this Principles of Scientific Management from 1911. However, what happened in the reason why I believe the 1920s are mentioned specifically here is because that was the time when statistical methods started being developed and used more, were discovered, were developed in Britain and elsewhere, and applied all over the world. And which becomes even more clear in the like for instance, Walter Shewhart's statistical process control method and diagram was developed in 1926 when he was working at the AT&T, developing telephones. And the idea was that two telephones should be exactly alike. So that's how they looked at this process to make sure everything was to reduce the variation. But it continues to work on to develop statistical quality control methods in industry in the 1930s. He wrote a famous book in 1930, another one, and this one, Statistical Method from the Viewpoint of Quality Control, 1939, which was later republished in the 1980s. And then we have the 1940s. I'm not sure so much happened there, because the only thing that they mention here is the establishment of the ASQ, American Society for Quality, then called American Society for Quality Control, which I think is quite important. Stressing this quality control is really what is hidden beneath this total quality management, total quality control management. And although other things happened, of course, there's not least the development of systems theory, cybernetics, operational research. Although this very much having to do with the war years and the way scientists try to contribute in developing technology and methods for winning the war. But then we have the 1950s, when all these war efforts like operational research and system theory, when they would try to apply that within industry. You have things like the Total Quality Control book from Feigenbaum from 1961, and the Quality Control Handbook by Duran 1956, and Total Quality Control by Feigenbaum 1961. However, another aspect that perhaps even more important is the way that after the war, when the Americans went from the hot war into the cold war, and the Americans were very concerned and very worried about these devastated nations turning communist. So they developed this Marshall Plan, trying to help various countries through economic support and scientific and technological support. So they sent a number of the quality control experts and other industrial experts sent to Japan, like some of those have later been described as the so-called quality gurus, like Feigenbaum and Duran, and also Deming, who is often described as the most important of all the gurus, and resulting in their work, they created in Japan, they created the Deming Quality Award. So he had a very important influence in Japan. But that also but when you think of but there was also a move from, in the United States, had not been destroyed during the war in the same way as the rest of the world. So there was not so much need for quality methods and quality control in America as elsewhere, and the market was a market of a seller's market. So it was a question of how to. So the Americans were more concerned with just producing things that were good enough, because there was an insatiable market. In Japan, on the other hand, they started producing a low quality products at cheap prices, but quickly but there was a need for improving quality. So there you had this very rise of quality management. This also resulted in what is stated here in 1968 and 1960s, the rise of the Asian economies, and Japan particularly in terms of quality management, which described, for instance, by Ishikawa in his 1985 book, What is Total Quality Control? The Japanese Way, where he argues, and interestingly says that total quality control, or what they call company-wide quality control in Japan, he says that this would never work in countries outside of Japan in the same way, because on the one hand it was based on Western ideas, particularly scientific management and the statistical methods, but it also was integrated in the Japanese culture, which was partly a hierarchical culture, but also a collaborative culture, and founded on ideas like Buddhism and Shintoism. And so it was a particular aspect of the quality, the culture, that made it work in a way which he believed that could not be reproduced elsewhere. Regardless of that, Japanese quality got better and better, and by the late 1970s, early 1980s, they were out-competing the Americans in several areas, and so that is when the Americans got worried a bit in the same way as they are now worried about China being outcompeted by China. So they there was some tension there, of course, but finally they had to understand also that this was not. There were certain reasons why the Japanese performing better, and so people like Deming, who had been working in Japan in the 1950s, suddenly became a national hero of the total quality management movement. And he explained why these methods worked and what the methods were, why they worked in Japan, and how they could be applied in the United States and everywhere. So the history of TQM ends there today. So today that means from the late 1970s until today. So today is a 40-year span. But quality management, still, if you look at this rather recent book, Quality Management by Beckford, he still talks about total quality management, and they'll talk about it in that way. So it's although it's very much in fashion and very much a focal issue in the early 1980s, and was later replaced to some degree. People started talking a little more about ISO 9000 quality management systems, lean manufacturing, Six Sigma quality, and things like that. The overall term of total quality management, as explained earlier, as this long-term philosophy with focus on customer satisfaction, that has remained, and like in this book by Beckford from 2022 is an example of. So, and if you look at this, for instance, when we look at this return to the American Society for Quality web page, they will say that the thing where all these quality and this total quality control or total quality management IDs are embedded. It's the question not whether we are for or against, whether a TQM has been replaced or something like that. It's more like a question: how do we implement TQM? And they suggest 4 main methods. It's the Six Sigma method. It's the lean manufacturing method, both of them focusing on systems, the systems approach. Then we have the systems approach, focusing on the quality management system, or the management system by use of the ISO 9000 series of standards. And finally we have this MBNQA, which stands for the Malcolm Baldrige National Quality Award, or in Europe what we call the EFEQA, the European Quality Award, based on the or the EFQM, European Foundation for Quality Management, which is an emphasis on the organization as a whole, which puts more emphasis on things like leadership, culture, and aspects that are more strategic and goes beyond what is mentioned in the other ones. So okay, if you look at these methods, for instance, let's start with lean manufacturing, just in time. That was earlier, it was called often called just in time management. But when Toyota factory started creating Toyota management, what's called Toyota company, Toyota Motor Company started creating plants in America. The people at MIT did some studies, and one particular study from 1987, they decided to introduce the word lean manufacturing as a way of describing how the cars were being developed at the Toyota factory. And there was a famous book called the what do you call it? The Machine That Changed the World, about the car industry from 1990 perhaps, 1980, 89. And then we have this lean thinking on Bournemouth and Jones from 1996, where they try to describe this. I still think it's a very good description of the principles behind lean manufacturing and how to make that work. So the key idea here is we start with customer focus. What does the customer want? If you're producing a Toyota car, what kind of car does the customer want? What brings, what produces, what is of value in the eyes of the customer? That's the first thing. Then you create this flow chart or this map of the value stream, and that means to map out during the assembly line what are the steps that add value to the final product, and what are things that do not necessarily add value, but you have to do it anyways. So that is the mapping. You have to create this flow chart or this process. And then third step, create flow, or single, what they often is called single item flow. So then you focus on each individual car as it's being assembled on the assembly line, and make each of them flow go gradually down the assembly line. Point 4, establish pull. That's how you decide how quickly the speed of the movement and down the assembly line. And the idea there is you don't move anything forwards before there is a request for it. So everything, and in the end that means that you don't produce unless there are customers asking for something. So, and as long as the people asking, you're filling, and that's the way of making sure that repositories and everything are kept minimal. The final point, seek perfection, is to make this whole thing improve and improve by removing things that do not add value, and try to innovate and improve the process. To some extent, I think this is it's possible to think of it from a bicycle race, in the sense of identifying value. Then you have this very, if you're on this Tour de France, the race is starting somewhere, it's ending somewhere, so it's very clear, and the values you want to reach the goal as quickly as possible, and you have to follow this particular route. That is what gives at the maximum speed. And then the question is, so you get that comes more like that. a bit like this assembly line. And then you have to create flow in a way people are following this particular rhythm in order to not veer out during the course. And you also have this idea of establishing pull by having somebody pulling the team. It's tiresome to be at the front, but it's important. These people at the front, they decide the pace of the whole group. So at least it's not a perfect illustration, but it says I think it illustrates to some degree how just-in-time management or lean manufacturing can be used in sport management. Although a more classical example of how it's being used is the Formula 1 racing, when they change tires, because then you want to do that as quickly as possible. Then when the cars go into depot, you have this team that change tires within very, very few seconds. And everything is mapped out and in this particular way. Well, that's the lean manufacturing approach to TQM. And then we have something different, a different idea, the Six Sigma. That was also developed in the 1980s by the Motorola company, and the idea then was to create zero defects. I'm giving a presentation here. Okay. So zero ja, jeg falt ut av det. Ikke meg.
Ødela jeg nå?
So just to visualize the idea, if you from a sports perspective, if you are interested in jumping, for instance, you want to go over this particular line, jump, and so if interesting, jumping over line, never failing. Then each time we can measure the distance between the rope or the line and the athlete, and we get if he jumps hundreds of times, we may perhaps get find the distribution. Perhaps it follows normal distribution as presented in yellow here. In order to make absolutely sure that it never hits the line, we want to make sure that the variation is as minimal as possible, and the variation is measured in what's called standard deviations. And if the process is above this, in this particular case, there is no upper limit, but if there is a lower limit, and if the variation is so small that it's six standard deviations above the lower limit, the average is 6 standard above the upper limit, then the risk of tearing down line is close to zero. Is practically close to zero, practically the same as zero. So that is the idea in this, and we have ways of statistical or mathematical ways of measuring this in terms of what is called capability maturity indexes. So that is the idea behind the Six Sigma approach. So, but both the lean manufacturing and Six Sigma approach they focused on the practical side of things, the process perspective, or what I here call the operational level of TQM. But the problem with only focusing on the operational level, as I try to write here below, Lean Six Sigma focuses on processes and thus create results, but they need to be embedded in ISO 9001 systems to become sustainable. Well, the problem can be that if we only try to improve the process, and there's no sooner or later you may get tired of the particular process and it may erode. So at least that's my experience with the implementation of Lean, particularly in the public sector, which I have been studying for several decades. That's they start doing some things and then may get some lean processes, but then they forget and everything go back to what it used to be. So the idea here pointed out by Mikkel Wright is to integrate Lean Six Sigma with ISO 9000, because then you do not only have these processes that you improve on and you make, but you also integrate the process into the system, and then you can audit the system to make sure that everything stays within the system. This is what the quality, this is the ISO 9000 model as used for designing quality management systems. So what we see here is that this system is described more like a cybernetic system. It's a cyclical system following what is called the Plan, Do, Check, Act of continual improvement. You see on the left side you see customer requirements going in. On the right side you see results of quality management system, products and services, customer satisfaction. But within the white area here we have the cyclic process, starting with planning. Then you have the planning, what you're going to do this year, what this month, this week, today. Then we have the on the upper side, the support and operation status. This is the Lean and Six Sigma, what is actually being done within the industry or in the athlete or whatever is being done, the practical thing. And then on the right side, performance and evaluation. You measure the results. And particularly with focus on what did not work or what could have gone wrong, which leads onto at the bottom the improvement, because then you want to make sure that whatever went wrong does not go wrong again, and if there were chances of things going wrong, you have to put in mitigating actions to prevent things from blowing up at a later stage, and then it goes back to new planning. So this is a cyclic process, which it can go different, like annually, monthly, weekly, daily, follow this sort of thing. And in the middle of it you have leadership. It's also important that it has to be owned by, you have to have leadership and management commitment. So this ISO 9000 approach, that's very popular, as we see just at this particular internet site. It was said that approximately 2.1 million organizations there are approximately 2.1 million ISO 9001 certificated organizations in the world. That is very good from a quality control perspective. Not at least from from an academic perspective, because then they can study this, but also from a practical perspective, because if the organizations commit to the same standards, then they can also learn from each other. But there are also questions which has been risen from academia and elsewhere, and that is, of course, when people are being forced to follow certain standards, they may not be, they are externally motivated rather than internally motivated. So the reason for following a ISO 9000 standard may not necessarily be to satisfy customers, to make the organization, make people work on how to improve processes and so on and so on. So it may be more because they have been told, in order to get the contract, you have to follow this standard. So on the far left, you have this study by John Seddon from the late 1990s, which is an argument against the standard, because he found, in his view, it led often to reduction of quality. Either there was no improvement, people were just following the standards, or in some cases, worst cases, the bureaucracy of following the standards resulted in poorer quality. That was a long time ago, 1997, because there come revisions of the standards with focus even on how to compensate for those things. But still, those are important issues, and Brunson and Jacobsen, in their 2000 book on World of Standards, they write more extensively on the culture, on the whole industry of quality standards. It has to do with the people, the organizations creating the standards, the consultants selling standards, the auditing community, and you have all these sorts of people who are interested in maintaining and improving standards, which may or may not coincide with the interest of improving quality. Hopefully it does, but it may not necessarily do so unless we have, as pointed out on the far right side of the presentation, what is called lean ISO 9000 management, which is at least the point Mickelwright makes, which I agree very much on, and that's you have to make sure that the ISO 9000 quality management standard is implemented in the spirit of lean manufacturing, just-in-time management, and also perhaps Six Sigma, the ideas following the statistical methods of Six Sigma. So that is so there is so in other words, there is the risk at the left side of stupid implementation, and then we have the hope at the right side of intelligent implementation. We're not only working according to these ISO 9000 standards because we have to follow them, but because we find them useful for sustaining, for improving organization and sustaining lean efforts and similar efforts. So the quality management systems is something I would place at the tactical level of TQM implementation. But then we have something important mentioned by Beckford in the final chapter of his quality management book from 2002, where he says management commitment is the single most critical issue in the pursuit of quality. Without it, the program will fail, as so many do. When we looked at this ISO 9000 model, at the very center of the model, it said leadership. So one of the aspects you have to audit when making quality management systems is to make sure that management is committed to the standard. They understand the standard, and they understand they're interested in improving quality and so on. But there are also we know from practice that this may not always happen, because we have issues like what Sutton pointed out, that there's also this this cultural issue. So it's not always so easy. You have managers who are committed to different things, and they have to consider time. Quality is often balanced against time and scope, and sometimes it's more important to do something quickly than to deliver with top quality. So even though they, in writing, they may commit to leadership, may commit to quality management, in practice it may not always be so. But then we have this this EFQM model at the top, the strategic level, and that is the European Quality Award. And the idea here is to not only look at the processes and systems are just part of this overall do this overall assessment, because the main thing, the main focus of the assessment model is the three pillars. It starts with leadership on the far left, we have processes in the middle, and key performance results on the right. Well, when we look at the model from the arrows on the top, it says enablers on one side and results of the other side. So you have to. We are interested in getting as good results as possible. When it says key results, that includes, of course, economic results. But also it says here we are also interested in customer results, as was defined in when it talks about the TQM at the very beginning. That is the key philosophy we have to. So you see that gets a higher percentage point than the financial results. Customers, you have to make this sustainable. We have to, but there are also people results. So it's important from a total quality management perspective that you have to have happy people working there. So oppressive organizations would not score very highly on this, according to this. So you cannot really get high top total quality management results if you run the organization in a tyrannical manner. So that is you could do that. You could do that in the case of Lean or in Six Sigma or ISO 9000. It doesn't say anything about that. But in this case, when we look at the Total Quality Award, it is one of the things, the results that are used for measuring total quality. And we also have this at the bottom there, society results. So we have to make a positive, like pollution and the green aspects of the organization. Those are also important. So you cannot pollute and work with that. You have to take social responsibility. That is also part of the results. So you know. In other words, what this means, it's a much wider perspective than what we first look at, the processes and then the system. But then we have the question of how does this work? And from what I have seen in various studies, and this is one of them. This is a very good and interesting paper, Musagared's paper from 2006. He refers to lots of other studies of how reported failure rates, and they are reported differently, but it seems to be about 80% of all efforts result in failure. 4 out of 5 attempts at implementing TQM does not work. Only 1 out of 5 succeed. And it's also interesting when he lists graph saying what is the reason for failure. So on the top here we have things like insufficient education and training, lack of employee involvement, 3, lack of top management support, 4, inadequate resources, 5, deficient leadership and poor management, 6, lack of quality-oriented culture. Now what is interesting about this is that all those aspects and on this graph, they were addressed by this European Quality Award model, the EFQM model. So the paradox here is really that is, as I see it, that we know how to, all the tools are there, all the theories is there. We know how to, what makes total quality management work. We know how it should be implemented, but still people fail, and they fail by not meeting by not following the theories and the models and the things that they say they are expected to follow, which is part of the theory. So in other words, the problem has more to do with TQM is not being taken seriously enough. It's a superficial approach because they miss at even the most basic things. In insufficient education and training, very, very basic thing for succeeding with TQM. Everybody knows it. I've known it for since the birth of, known for at least for 40 years. Still, it's a #1 failure. So that leads into this question: why are not people taking it seriously? And could it be because it's only it's taken superficially, because it's seen as a fashion or a fad? And there are some very interesting studies of management fashions in Abramson as in the 1990s. We got this feeling. If you look at here, this graph shows four potential fashions, management fashions. It's starting with the job enrichment fashion, starting in the 1960s and ending in the late 1970s. Then you have the very interesting the quality circles idea, which is the key theme actually in this paper by Abramson and Fairchild, because it was very much like total quality management, because at the time they were writing this article, total quality management was still in fashion, although it had, as we see here, it had reached a top and was quickly moving downwards. And they had another fashion starting called business process reengineering. But quality circles, that was clearly, that had come and gone and was now being replaced by total quality management. Total quality circles was based on the idea what you had observed in Japan, the Toyota company, and elsewhere, how workers got together to discuss problems in a voluntary way, in a non-hierarchical manner, where they could freely discuss what were the problems and come up with ideas how it could be solved, and then the process how they can then present problems and solutions to management. This was at the time, and in the late 1970s, that was seen as a revolutionary approach, very different from sort of democratization of work, which was very different from how American factories were working. And it was they thought that was perhaps one of the reasons why the Japanese were working so much better, and it was also taken up by in academia, because lots of people in academia thought this was interesting and it's could be seen as part of democratization of work, and it was politically interesting and so on. So when we look at this graph, they are created. This is number of articles, and it's number of articles both within popular media and also in academic media, academic journals. So if we look at only the publications in popular journals, then you will have this the same passion dynamics that you have in popular music, in clothing industry, in all over, where something starts out and you have it rises suddenly, it gets extremely popular, and then it declines equally with equally rapid speed and then become obsolete. As we see here in this quality, as we see here in the management fashion cycles, the dynamic is slightly different in the way that it starts. It may have a latency period, then something triggers rapid popularity surge. For instance, here you had this quality control idea, which has been for several decades, but suddenly when the Japanese were performing better than the Western industry, or particularly the American industry, that triggered an interest in why that was happening and whether that had something to do with quality management, which they believed, and caused this rapid popularity in search, like in the quality circles, but also total quality. Yes, like in the case of the quality circles, for instance. And then you have this period of popularity, which is lingers on for some period, and then you have a period of decline, which also lingers on. And the reason it lingers on is because mostly because the academic fashions in academia takes much longer, follows a longer cycle than in industry, because it takes time to publish, and then you've written something, others want to respond, and they continue and develop new ideas, and then you have this. But when the ideas get out of interest, when the industry loses interest, then it may be academic. There may be decline in academia also, although it comes at a later stage, and the period of decline may be much slower. But there's also this idea, this possibility of redefinition during the period of decline, like we saw in the case of the quality circles, that the decline of the quality circles also resulted in the redefinition in terms of interest in total quality management, which was a much more, not only the circles but the management concept, which went into this rapid popularity surge. So there may be one fashion may start another fashion in that way. So if you got to think, the title of this presentation was called Total Quality Management, Dead or Alive. So according to the what we saw from the American Society for Quality, it's still very much alive, according to that. But if you look at the Wikipedia entry, now you should be careful, of course, when looking at Wikipedia, but nevertheless it's interesting to just see what it says here. And it says, I think the Wikipedia entry is quite interesting. It says that interest in TQM as an academic subject peaked around 1993. That matches quite well with the graphs we looked at. It peaked in the early 1990s, and then it says the Federal Quality Institute was shuttered in September 1995 as part of the Clinton administration's effort to streamline government. They wanted less bureaucracy, so the Federal Quality Institute was shuttered in September 1999 as part of the Clinton administration's effort to streamline government. And then that's the European Center for Total Quality Management closed in August 2009. So all these things point in the direction of TQM being a fashion, which was very much alive in the late 1980s and early 1990s, and is perhaps now not alive in the same way as it used to be. But the Wikipedia entry says more. It says TQM as a vaguely defined quality management approach was largely supplanted by the ISO 9000 collection of standards and their formal certification processes in the 1990s. This is interesting. This matches with this idea of how one fashion may lead into another, and how the TQM, just like we saw, the quality circles were redefined the total quality management, and then we have the total quality management being redefined into what we saw as business process reengineering in the previous slide. Here they mention ISO 9000. I think that makes sense, both of them, and it also says here business interest in quality improvement under the TQM name also faded as Jackwell's success attracted attention to Six Sigma, and Toyota's success attracted attention to lean manufacturing. Though the three share many of the same tools, techniques, and significant portions of the same philosophy. So this is once again the same thing, that it's the fashion. The ideas, one fashion leads to another, although it could also be seen as a redefinition of the same thing. So when you talk about same tools like the statistical process control and the same philosophy, they continue to refer to the same quality gurus, Duran, Deming particularly, Feigenbaum, Crosby. So from this perspective, one might argue that TQM as a vaguely defined the quality management approach, although it was supplanted by others, it still lives on through different names. But also in its own name, as I stated in the final sentence here, TQM lives on in various national quality awards around the globe. Like we looked at the European Quality Award. And we have also the national, like the Spanish Quality Award, the British Quality Award, the Dutch Quality Award, and so on. But then I did some also to look at some empirical data on this. If you go to this question, is TQM dead or alive? Here I've done some used Google Scholar, and because the fashion charts I looked at previously, those were focused specifically on specific journals, and in order to see how TQM was being treated within specific. But if you just look at raw data in general, it will be interesting to see what it looks like. So on the upper left we have this what to call this pole chart, not pole chart, but this histogram, this hva kaller man histogram på engelsk? This bar chart. The most popular at the latest data in 2022, the ISO 9001 was the most popular, followed by TQM, then Six Sigma, Lean, and finally EFQM. What is interesting here is when we look at the middle ones, like TQM, on the upper right, those are the results from the TQM, not from the article, but from the Google Scholar. It started out similarly as the innovator started out with nothing, and it's a rapid growth in the early 1990s. It takes slightly longer before it reaches this this plateau, but rather than going down into a period, there's this period of success, but rather than going into a period of decline, it goes to another period of rapid growth, which is even more radical than the initial one. And the interesting part is that it continues to grow and grow and grow. And although at the very end there is something going up and down, so it's not 100% certain what is happening, but the general feeling looking at this diagram is that the academic interest in total quality management has never been as big as it is now. Now there have been many reasons for this, because there are many more journals and more scientists and people writing, and a higher stress on the people having to publish on than before. So, but still, it's an interesting phenomenon, because it's very different from what one would expect based on the fashion theory and what we saw from the Wikipedia page. The same thing we see in the case of Six Sigma. There was a rapid growth and then some sort of stability, but from 2003 to 2004 it goes upwards. So even though the total quality management and Six Sigma may be featured in academic journals from people talking about just as reference to other methods, still they are being talked about. So from an academic perspective, they're not dead, I would say. They look very much alive. No indication of decline from this set of data, although, as I pointed out, Google Scholar is not the best tool, but it's still interesting. Then we have something and it is interesting also because we have it contrast with what we see in the case of the ISO 9000 standards and the EFQM assessment model. Because in those cases there is an indication of a decline. It is a long period of rapid growth, but for the last 10, 15, 20 years there has also been decline. It's particularly prominent in the case of the EFQM model, but also in the case of ISO 9000. although ISO 9000 is still the most popular of all these. What is now? So TQM is one gets the impression, at least the TQM, Six Sigma and Lean, they are very much alive according to these graphs. ISO 9000 EFQM are a bit more worrisome. There are indications of decline, clear indications of decline here, but that also raises the question when
Okay. Hei!
hello.
Så etter det, jeg vil
Oops. If you look at Wikipedia, at least at the bottom there, it says TQM lives on in various national quality awards around the globe. So that raises the question if there is less interest, less academic interest in national quality awards. That could be a reflection of less industrial interest in national quality awards. And I know, at least in the case of Norway, that there are no longer any national quality awards here. So that is a bit worrisome, even though the EFQM model is being revised. So the latest version came from 2020, so that's a relatively new, and that was a very radical change. And in some countries, like in the national quality awards, play an important part in industry and also become interesting for academia. But still, I think it was really, I think it's important to put a question mark there. Although what we initially saw from the diagrams, that whether they peaked around 1993, when we look at the Google Scholar, yeah, then they peaked much later. They peaked just 10 years ago or something like that. But it is also possible to another perspective on total quality management is to go back to, if you go back to the roots of total quality management as part of scientific management. Like we start talking about Frederick Taylor playing tennis and using those the inspiration from sport management for organizations, and the way history of total quality management started with the 1920s, when statistical methods and statistical controls introduced into scientific management. Then it's interesting to look at if you look at the Google Scholar statistics for scientific management, which is a very old, which is from 1911, then we see that the early period here, there was a decline in interest from well, it was popular for some years, and then there was a decline until the end of the war. So from the early 1950s, it started. There is a rapid growth, and when we look at the wider on the diagram on the bottom right, it just continues to grow exponentially. So scientific management, which is really, in my opinion, what total quality management is about, namely to improve organizational performance by use of experiments and a scientific approach, exactly as in the spirit of what Frederick Taylor was doing. Then I think it's possible to say that no matter the popularity of something like ISO 9000, EFQM, lean manufacturing, business process, all these come and go, but the idea of TQM as scientific management that lingers on, that continues to grow, and I think that it also has to grow, because the only way of addressing these problems in a scientific manner is scientific management. So, final slide, applying the principles of scientific management to sport management. So in a way, as we started out, that the scientific ideas of Frederick Taylor, as he applied it within with using stopwatches and improving tennis rackets and everything, that remains relevant, is as relevant today as it was 150 years ago. But something that was added in during the heydays of TQM, and when TQM was when the TQM fashion was at the top of popularity, are certain additional aspects, more philosophical aspects, which Edward Deming wrote about in his book that was published a year after his death, where he described something called the system of profound knowledge, and that consists of four components. The first one is the appreciation for a system, systems thinking, the holistic approach, the totality in total quality management. That was not present, as clearly present in the works of Taylor, but that has become part of modern, what makes total quality management important today. Secondly, understanding variation, and that is statistical theory that was also not developed in the 1880s and when Taylor published his book in 1911, but it was developed and continues to be in the 1920s, 30s, and as we saw in the case of Six Sigma, it was also continues to be developed and applied in new ways in order to focus on things like zero defects. That is also a very modern and important aspect of total quality management that applies to sport management. And we have this something called theory of knowledge. Deming was concerned with there is no knowledge without theory. Which means that it's not, you have to have some ideas, you have to have some models, some metaphors, models, something used to, something you can do to predict what is going to happen, something that can be tested. So, which is a part of how modern science works. We use scientific models of different kinds, systems models, game models, and we develop interventions based on the belief in those models. If the interventions don't work, then we have to question the models, perhaps improve the models. So scientific management and total quality management is not only about applying knowledge, it's about executing the scientific method. It means also to develop knowledge. We develop local theory. Within this, there's a theory of football, a theory of basketball, a theory of tennis, a theory of golf, or there should be, with the models that can be tested. And finally, we have this, Deming pointed out, psychology, the humanistic perspective. That was something that was particularly emphasized in the EFQM model. We talked about the importance of how people should be treated fairly and enjoy work, the people results, and also which includes how people are and personal management methods, like knowing how to motivate people, how people learn. But it also has to do with psychology and the problem with the implementation of these models. When it says that it is important with management commitment, then there has to be management commitment. So how do you create management commitment in cultures of fear and oppression? These are from the viewpoint of TQM, those are important aspects in order to succeed with TQM. And as we saw, most organizations fail to do it. We know the theory of TQM, we know but there are implementation challenges. So this is where I will end the talk.